live button has been pressed. There's nothing that can be done. We've already pressed the button. It's going live. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Levels are looking good. Whew, yes. Get your power. All right, it says it's streaming, but I haven't seen the stream come alive yet, so let me just wait. Go live from your webcam. All right, Wholeness and Balance Vibrations family, if you are tuning in right now, we're letting it breathe for just a moment. It's equinox. Oh, wait, no. Spring, wait, what is it? It's fertility time. So I wanted to get in here and I wanted to deliver a very special message. It's not going to be a long one. And I want to talk about your power, your energy, because it's coming through right now. And I want you to be focused so that way you can receive your next level of abundance. So just give me a quick second. Let me check in on YouTube. Also, we got the gram here. Was good. And we're just going to keep it moving with this. So let's see here. My channel. All right, so maybe this is not breathing on YouTube yet. So let me see. YouTube stream now. It says it is. My channel. All right, do you see anything on that YouTube Innerstanding channel yet? Okay, it says it's live. It says it's unlisted though. What does that mean? Unlisted. Let's make it public. Okay, I see. Stream now is like now I get it. Like, I'm always wondering, it's like, man, why doesn't this thing have XYZ? Okay, so Wholeness and Balance Vibrations, everyone. This is a very special time that we're obviously going through right now. I just wanted to jump in here. We're about to roll into spring. And I really wanted to, keep bringing these jewels, keep bringing this knowledge about our power and about our connection. And, demystify a lot of the knots that are within what we know to be the truth. So if you just give me a quick second, I want to add some tags to today's show, since now I figured out exactly how YouTube stream now works. And I just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone that is tuning in, that's collecting with this collecting and connecting with this positive energy and this balance that we're bringing forth. Like, this is truly a special time. Like, I see just so much love and so much awareness starting to spread through things. And, I see those other forces still trying to hang on, but man, it's just, they're getting dragged. Meaning that, we're realizing very rapidly the power and the connection that we all share with each other. And it's really, really starting to show within our actions and our deeds. And so I'm loving that connection. I'm loving this level of communication. So also, before we get started, I just want to let everybody know we are definitely in the powerful phase of raising the capital necessary to create our own conscious ecosystem to solve many of the issues that we're dealing with right now, especially in relation to finances. For those who are looking to create a foundation and get on that plan to sovereignty, we want to put something together that just allows our presence and our connection with each other to become the highest value. And when we look deeper into exactly how the monetary system works, how money works, what we find is that this is not only possible, but it's already been done. And I believe the crypto space had actually introduced quite a few different ways of how that's done. Even though the overall field became saturated, it still left everyone that did study deep enough with the notion that you can be a bank and that you do have a lot of value. So speaking of value, and I'm going to go ahead and jump into today's presentation. But speaking of value, you have a lot of value, and value in many tenses is power, because if you have something that is very valuable, the more it has value to others, the more it increases who you are. And so that's how the world works. We look to create value, of course, in our uniqueness. It's very powerful to do it that way. And it's just because you can produce that endlessly. And so now I have the chat up. It looks like we have 28, 27 that's watching now. I'm going to go ahead and actually stop the stream and start it again. And just so that way these notifications go out. Actually, you know what? Let's just keep it moving. Why stop it? Let's keep the train going. So what this is about today actually is this is about exactly where the power is coming from, and how you know the power is moving, and how not to get tricked by the energy systems that try to tell you where the power is and what it does and who it comes from. So we're going to start off with some symbolism here. So as you know, we're going into spring in a couple days here, right? Give me just a quick second. Let's see here. All right, here we go. Okay, so as you know, we're actually going through this process of a big energy boost. So let's just talk about some of the basics around this. So when you think about fertility, abundance, right, building current, this is what people are still clicking on those. Hey, listen to the 5 secrets of the millionaire. 5. We've interviewed 10 of the world's richest people, and here's what they said of how they became rich. And people still click on that because they want to be rich. They want to be wealthy. And we know that also connects into abundance. Okay, so somebody did say, wow, no notification. Okay, so this is what we did. And I mean, this is what we're going to do, because I definitely want to make sure we share this message live. I'm going to stop the stream, and then I'm going to start the stream again. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow everybody to get the proper notifications on YouTube. And I feel like that's very important, because we just have such a strong following there. And this is really a real-time message. That's why we do it live. So yeah, let me just stop it and start it, so you'll see the notification here in just one moment. All right, it's time to go into rare form, I guess. Okay, so let's go ahead and check back in on YouTube. Unfortunately, YouTube, they had a little situation where they unlisted my live channel. Well, actually, let me not put it on them. Maybe I did it. You know, it's just like a natural instinct. They did it. They tried to get me. They're censoring me. I only got 100,000 viewers, but I got that grade A. So, you know, they want to keep it away from everybody. But no, that's probably not exactly what's happening. It probably was user error on that one. So I don't want to be the guy who cries wolf. So I'm going to take a moment now to make sure that everybody is connecting. Cool. Okay, so everybody says they're good. Then I'm going to do a quick sound check to make sure that we can hear each other. Great. And then I'm going to go in, because I just wanted to do 15 minutes in here, heavy duty, real occultism, as we know, nothing less. So I'm just waiting for somebody to say in the chat, yeah, we can hear you. It's soft. It's good. It's not spiking. I'm not going to complain later. Somebody said, this is taking time to warm up. What, you am I on the stage? You paying me? It's like, hey, what is this? I want my money back. Come on, man. Okay, great. So somebody said they can hear me. All right, so here it is. So here's what you came for. So, I'm in the spectacle now. I'm in a cage. Watch out. I may break out. So what happens is that we have a situation that is happening on the earth right now. And we always get these moments where, I get these moments where I'm like, hey man, it's just really common sense. And if people weren't trying to make it so complicated all the time, maybe they would get what was going on. Anytime there's fertility happening, this means that somewhere on a bigger level, something is fertilizing things. So this means that when Earth starts to get to this point to where it gets fructification going on. What does that mean? Like flowers are blooming, things are blooming. that all means that there's fertility happening. And the way that we look at this, because, we've been made into scientists, with this curriculum that we've been using with the science classes. So everything is all stale, like a cold laboratory floor of an alien ship. So it's all, sterile and estranged, but that's not how life really is. Life has this very, very surprising component to it. And I actually want to talk about that real quick. I want to talk about that first before we even get into these fertility components. Is that, notice how with logic, okay? So let's say logic, okay? So we have, let's say, logic, and then we have this intuition, right? There's a UI, okay? So we have this intuition. So let's imagine then that the logic, which is, let's say, even math, right? Which we know as Ma'at. And this Ma'at means truth. Okay, let me shrink this down a little bit. Just give me a quick second here. Bottom panel going on down there. Okay. So this logic or this math, which means truth, it's always going to be like that. Meaning that if we come 10,000 years in the future, we'll be able to predict what's going on as long as we're dealing with the logical fields. Okay. So many people gravitate to these logical fields because they don't have really the element of surprise. So we'll say they are negative on surprise because everything that's going to happen. So 2,000 years in the future, you can just do this mathematical equation of cause and effects, actions and reactions, and you can even project yourself into this space. Even if you're just because you're extreme logic doesn't mean you don't have access to what we call the astral plane of the spiritual world. They're extremely logical beings on these planes. But there's also extremely intuitive beings on that plane also. So the reality here is that with logic is like, let's say, the masculine side of our consciousness. It can sometimes even be boring because, after all, I can predict everything. Everything is always estranged, okay? And it's interesting why I'm going to mention this because this is where I want everybody to realize why there's 4 poles. Let's say a positive, negative, versus this concept of that there's just 2 poles. Because if you were just saying, well, Ma'at and math and logic, and you're saying that's male, but that's supposed to be a female. And that's what you have to understand, that anything that has power has what? A male and a female component, right? And so in this extreme logic or Ma'at where everything can be predicted, it kind of gets really boring, or not kind of, it's very like orthodox in a certain tense. It's like there's no like expectation. It's like sit down, nothing to expect. It's like sit down and relax, keep calm. That's really the energy around the logic. So of course there would have to be something that wasn't like that. And that's where we get this intuitive side. And this is what they call the marriage. Let's say we'll call that the holy marriage. Sometimes they call it the sacred communion. Okay? And the reason why we deal with so much conflict every single day is because these 2 sides in most beings are constantly at odds with each other, versus any being that goes into hyperintelligence learns how to make these 2 sides work together and actually fall in love with each other. Because let's say if you're being logic all the time and you know everything that's going to happen, you start getting very boring. You're looking for the surprise. Now, let's say, for instance, also in this case, the surprise has a lot to do with the woman in itself too, or the female itself. The surprise is like the birth of a child that always looks different. The surprise is like when you're going deep into the womb, into areas that have not been mapped by logic yet, you don't know what to expect. And for beings that know what to expect all the time and are bored by that, they get excited by actually being able to dive into these intuitive fields. While beings that have been polarized into the intuitive fields and can't actually find any stability or any kind of bearing in what they're doing and meaning and purpose and all of that, simultaneously attract to the logical fields because they're looking for that stability. So if you can say again, the intuitive, free-spirited woman side is looking for that male side that actually gives her more logic. But that male side, let's say, because it's ma'at, you could say it's more like it's her evolving into a woman and basically becoming having the knowledge of an elder to realize that actually it goes beyond even just male and female. So I hope that's been very clear for everybody in relation to just this first aspect of understanding how you have this logical side of the consciousness and this intuitive side of the consciousness, and they're in a marriage together. That's even what we can call the spirit and the body. Every single dual component always could be separated into these two forces because that's how they always appear. So this begins to demystify the numbers because there's a number that's coming up known as 322, and because one of the major secret societies has taken that number and has associated it with death and all this and then made everybody scared of death, then everybody gets, not everybody, but a lot of people get around to these points when there's really a lot of life happening and they don't really get how the life connects to death because we're also coming out of a season and going into a new season. So the numbers are 322, and if you notice the number 3 is always symbolic to the triangle, right? Let's draw that here. And then the number 22, which is a 4, is always symbolic to the square. So with the triangle and the square, you get, and this is very primitive stuff. That's why it's not as complicated sometimes as people make it, but there is some complicated stuff that's in here. This makes a house, basically. And let me move let's see what's up with this iPad. Give me just a quick second. It's also, those on the gram, if you're on the gram and you want to see some of the pictures and things related to what we're talking about, then of course you would need to jump on to YouTube because you're not getting the screen share, unfortunately, of what I'm showing. And then also for those that are on the YouTube side, I just blew up the screen share a bit more so that you can actually see what I'm writing here with the iPad. And so what I'm revealing here is I'm revealing these two sides of the consciousness that are very much needed in order to create life, to create a house, to create a place where there could be all the variations that you need in your creative process. So because you have this extreme logical side, which keeps you stable enough to be able to create things. And then you have this intuitive side that takes you into this vista where you never know what to expect. And between these two forces, you are perpetual. That's energy, that's life, okay? So now with the planet, it also has that same thing going on. And this is now, again, because there's a cult of death, this has been confused because when the transition cycles come around, a lot of people don't want to let go of that previous cycle. They don't want to, let's say, shed that skin. So I'm going to show you the two top cults of the world today and what star systems they actually hail from and what the story is, more or less. So you can kind of realize how it's only this continuous preference of one thing over the other rather than realizing how everything connects. That action is what is actually keeping these beings from realizing, and this is all the human beings and even the entities within the animals, from realizing exactly how to actually accomplish this marriage of a communication, perfect communication. So there's beings that have achieved this. Don't think that there's like you're the only ones out here and that nobody's ever done this before, but that's not what's happening. This process of being able to merge these two fields is very well known, and in the higher world, the beings have already done it. So here on the planet, you have two groups that are very distinguished, and one is called, let's say, the mammal. Actually, I should actually write that second for a real reason. So let's say, for instance, this first group, we will call the reptile, right? And then we have the second group, which we'll call the mammal. And these are the only two groups that we want to focus on right now because they actually make up all of the animal energetics. And by the way, just a word to extremes. If we at times can just use the elements that we have in our daily lives to determine what's really happening, we can see that on one side, fire is like an extreme because on this other side, ice meets it as an extreme, right? And then somewhere in between here, you kind of have steam, right? You have warm, You have these in-between phases and cycles that actually show you there is a real in-between phase, but there's also these extremes. And the extreme components, they're actually utilized as the creative components themselves. This is why, just like we were talking about earlier with the intuitive and logic, those are like the fire and ice. And what you're responsible for doing is creating this warmth and this steam out of these forces. And that you could do by actually maintaining balance. So we have then this reptile and this mammal. And the reason why these two are the most instrumental is because if you really look at the Earth story, let's say even the Earth animal story, even the occult Earth story, they always involve these two beings, whether it's the mammal as the human being and the reptiles as the invaders are coming from another planet or from inside the planet. But you always get these two forces. And there's a reason for that. And that reason has a lot to do with the actual fertilization process that actually is happening to Earth right now as we speak, and always happens around this time. And what this has to do with is it has to do with these constellations, which I'm going to talk about specifically, which are Taurus, Aldebaran, the Pleiades, and Orion. Okay? So if you notice here right away, and I'm going to give you just two occult stories and some occult symbolism. So in Orion, let's say, is supposed to be some giant man, okay? There's some dog with him who's Leprechaunus, who's also Ra, who's Wepawat, who's the Canine from Canaan. He's also even related closely to this dog, like it's his best friend. And then there's the 7 stars of the Pleiades, right? Which we kind of always see as like chicks, like Electra and all that, right? Because that's the mythology in the Greek mythology. But anytime you get the number 7 and related to stars and lights, you can automatically start running off a 7-band light system. And what that equates to let's put some color here. This equates to a spectrum. Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you. I'm glad I got my partner over here in the studio with me. Thank you. So, excuse me, I'm going to go back over this really briefly. So we have this symbolism of the giant related to Orion, like a big man. Big man, want to make some big bucks. Then we have his dog, which is Wepawat, where you get www and your www dot. And this is known as Ra. This is also known as Canis. This is also known as Cannabis. This is also known as Anubis. So this dog is very instrumental, and it's his best friend. They have a special relationship, but we won't talk about that right now. And then we have the 7 sisters of the Pleiades, right, hanging out over here. And these are supposed to be women. So right away, if you just want to just make this a club, there's a big guy and 7 girls. I mean, what's going to happen here? Probably a lot of fructification. And that's exactly what this constellation is generally symbolic for, that through the Pleiades, many say, many of the races of the world and many of the different persuasions of the world come from this. However, there's one final mystery about the Pleiades, which is kind of like obvious when you really think about it. And it's just that anytime you get 7 of something, you're generally talking about 7 colors on a spectrum. And you're generally talking about, and this is where you would get, let's say, this pyramid, and then light going into the pyramid. And basically what you get is you're getting that each of these is wombs. And this is sometimes seen as what they just call the great serpent. Basically a womb, okay? Let's say a womb, okay? And that by the time you go through this womb of these 7 colors and you pop out the other side, you have now like a full-on, what they just sometimes symbolize under the pentagram, you have a full-on phi-base body. Like and you're going to be basically of this race of Orion and the Pleiades, right? And now I've seen these guys run around. Like I've seen people who are so devout to this that they actually unlock all of it. And, if they unlock what we call the inverted part of this, because now if you notice, there's an hourglass here. Okay, let me turn that on. So you see how there's like an hourglass shape sitting right here over where this is got this circle right here. This is like an hourglass, right? So this hourglass is also symbolic to exactly how Orion is more or less constructed with its power. And that's, it has this negative center, which some sometimes refer to as Hades or the netherworld. And then it has this positive center. And then it loves to merge those two centers together in order to create this power. And this is also related to the Tetragrammaton, right? And this is, of course, the free energy fields. This is, of course, the Taurus field, because all of it is related, but there's a schism happening here. There's an actual family conflict going on in here. So just so you can kind of see the energy around Orion, you see the seven sisters, they're really all combined. There's one womb, but when the womb splits it all into these different colors, you get these different prisms. And in these prisms, you get basically these incubation stations, right? Some like to see this as the prison, because basically the light is trapped. Basically, when clear light is shined in, it becomes trapped and it condenses into the corners. And these corners are known as the oob. And this is the symbol of the oob, which is known as the Mercedes-Benz symbol. No, I'm joking. But serious, this is the oob. It's known as the nail in the Kabbalah. It's basically what holds the points of the cube together. It's a very powerful symbol, okay? So all we're dealing with right now then is that this constellation of Orion has a lot to do with birthing like serpent beings, right? Which some people just call souls or spirits. You know, they can be of different colors and different races. And, you know, they have this god they call High Father and the Tetragrammaton. Then they have these mothers. And, you know, these mothers are also vying for power. And so there's this is the Orion saga. Okay, I just want you to get that very clear. That's what it's known about as in occultism. So now because Orion's kind of doing a lot these days, he's getting the most PR. So there's still a very hidden cult that is just as hidden as why we don't talk about werewolves, but we talk about vampires a lot. But it's just as hidden because it's another constellation that actually a lot of power is being drawn from. And it also has an equally occult meaning. And it's also in the same neighborhood. And this is, of course, Aldebaran, which has always been somehow wrapped up into satanic worship and wrapped up into those kind of mythologies. But it's really because of what I was explaining on my last show in relation to where this knowledge is actually coming from. So, is it possible, and this is just a question that I'm proposing directly to you, I already know the answer, that for many, their Ma is, and I'm just going to go by the correct terms first, that way before we get into the degradation, okay? Now, the ancient tongue it's called the Arak, okay? So an Arak is where we get the English word a from, okay? And it's because this English word a, and we've talked about this, actually is the horns of a bull, okay? And this bull is Taurus, okay? So you see up here in this constellation, let me see here real quick. Let me get I just need one more image here. I thought I had downloaded it. Give me one more second. Let me just put up some of the cult images related to this, and then I'm going to find the actual constellation itself. Just give me a second here. I don't have that running. Let me move me out of the way. Okay. And then let me move this over here. So these are the ancient seals that talk about this process, okay, that we're experiencing right now, where the energies, basically all of the energies are in a communion with each other, okay? And this is why the Earths and many other planetary systems and other kingdoms all become fertile at this component and at this point. And when you're at this point, if you waste your energy, or if you think this somehow connects to the end and death, and you know, and you buy into some of these massive rituals that happen during these times, that's why they just had the mosque shooting, right? And there's just all sorts of like lots of the which is called Leprechaunus. It's basically a wolf ritual taking place also during this same time. And this wolf ritual is basically about sacrifice, okay, and mass sacrifice. So this tries to loom in at the same time because there's an inverted part of this constellation that I'm about to show you also. Just like I told you about, there's an inverted part of Orion. So when you hear it from the Orion crew, they'll be saying stuff like, oh yeah, it's the Hamites, and curse the Hamites because they, did X, Y, Z. And then now, in their constellation, their god Moloch is the evil god. And that's the one who's bringing all the destruction into the earth. Okay, so that's what you'll hear from them. Then if you go down there and, if you didn't just get one side of the story and you decide to catch the celestial boat down there into the Delta and say, so what really happened? And they'll say, actually, it was Orion, his high father, and the serpents that are up there because they always want to be in dominion and they want to reign over everything. And the divine mother doesn't want that. And she just said basically that she can continue to produce without any of their DNA or anything because she actually has the great word and the great name, which she stole from High Father, because that's Inanna's story. Inanna is the Taurus. She's the bull. And she took the name of the Tetragrammaton from the High Father, which is, of course, Orion, and she can use it on her own. So she can create, which is called parthenogenesis, on her own. And in her kingdom, let's say, for instance, it is symbolic to the Taurus, or the mother, the mu, the cow, the warmth, the womb, right? And her fructifying agent, and let me just get this up on the screen here. Is the bull, also known as Aldebaran, which is also symbolic to a triangle in itself. And this bull also moves through and it basically fertilizes this region. And so let me just put that up here on the screen. And very briefly, we're coming to a close here. You see Aldebaran here. You see Orion. You see Taurus. You see the Pleiades, okay? And in this, what you're seeing is really this. This is known as the quadrifoil magnet. Basically, it's the actual imprint of what you would see if we laid Earth down on a magnetic pad, just so you can see the fields, and you laid the cosmos down on a magnetic pad, just so you can see the field, you would see a quadrifoil. And so anybody who's stuck in this, right, and never realized that, hey, even in Orion, there's good ones and bad ones. Even in Aldebaran or down there in Taurus, there's good ones and bad ones. If that's what if you're getting to, is just to try to figure out where the good ones and bad ones are. But even deeper than all of that is that these are basically the regeneration stations of the energy that is coming through the cosmos. And it is still through these conflicts, which we call them conflicts. They're just opposing forces. Through these opposing forces maintaining their status and ability to stay polarized, we become the steam and we become the warmth unless we choose to take on those components. So we have this choice. And choice is basically what binary and all that really is. Yes, no, on, off, back, forth. All that is what's just called choice. And through those choices, we can program our own reality. So if we want, again, because you'll see the energies roll around, and as you know this knowledge more and more, you'll notice Easter will roll around. There'll be all these things that have to do with fertility, but there'll be a lot of death going on in the reality where people will be more tapped into lost than they're tapped into, hey, this is the time where I'm going to actually go into the windfall of all of what I've been developing. Meaning this is the time where if you really were going to demand your power and going to demand that your life flow into a very high wave of balanced energy, you would want to do it now. So with that being said, I will take a moment, just to look at the chat to see, if there's any questions. If you do have a question, I can stay for a few of them. All I ask is that you kind of type question before your question. I'll see if I can actually get it. Let me see if I can put this thing in a slow-mo. Let's see here. right? So it seems like we got about 357 people on. Chat's wide open. And we're just taking about 5 minutes to see if anybody has some questions that are directly related to what we're talking about that need to be answered. And while we're closing into those final questions, I'll just bring in some final thoughts into this. So the reason why I want to make this very simple for everybody, because this is how the ancients taught. And then when we looked at their knowledge, and because we were confused, we thought that all of their knowledge was just like primitive and we had went so far. But even under the basic symbolism, when you know the basic symbolism, it's almost like when you see this symbol, you're already talking about stars. You're already talking about specific planetary systems. You're already talking about fertility components. You're already talking about suns, like actual solar systems. You're talking about a lot. So this is in itself so arcane that any architect that knows what you're referring to, or knows where to find these symbols, or knows what these symbols mean, also knows how to line up a perfect energy system. And actually that a perfect energy system would be lined up inside themselves. So they would come into this great stage of awareness that there's these forces that are moving through, and each of them are vying, because they're primes. Each of them are vying to be you. Like, oh, you're just a triangle. Oh, no, you're a moon. Oh, you're definitely a sun. And it wants to keep you in that phase, because that's it. That's how it works. That's how they are. That's how nothing's ever going to change that. It's just like why gold is gold. But when we look at the human being, this is what's so amazing. We find that the human being is gold too. You got gold moving through your body, and you got all this other stuff. So rather than looking at it as like this huge drawback of our experience here and what's happening because we're having a little bit of difficulty actually getting something so powerful back under control and into our level of awareness, it's better now to look at it as you're in an immortal vehicle that's never going to end. So the faster that you really gain bearing on what's happening, and even simplify that for yourself, like tell yourselves these stories that make perfect sense. And when you look into these beings, that you see every part of what they really are. So for instance, when we look into the reptile, we know reptile only has one strand of DNA. That means that there has a tendency to be more of just a direct, I'm not changing my mind, always acting before thinking kind of behavior. And then when you go further and you look at the skin, like we talk about the derma or the dream or the shedding skin of the serpent, is also seen as the illusionary component of the human being, which is basically our skin. The outside skin of the human being is symbolic to the serpent, and it's constantly shedding. And it also shines. It actually gives off these rays of these different light spectrums that have a lot to do with your aura. But the tricky thing about it, and the reason why it brings about illusion, is because it covers all the other organs. So in most cases, people are more concerned about their outer appearance and how they look and what the skin reveals than things like their heart and things like their kidneys and spleens, which are also chakras, equally working to keep the entire vehicle alive. And then you also have mixed races, of course. This is really where things get pretty interesting, and why we always get these surprising variables. And that's why they sometimes call it the great harlot or the great whore. And this just means that it's a womb that actually is able to take in so many different kind of suitors, that all types of beings are birthed from those combinations. So of course there's very estranged beings that they have an issue with that, meaning that because they haven't had that mixture yet, then they're sitting over there like, we shouldn't mix. And then one of their kids end up mixing, and then they're just sitting back there pissed off on the bed like an old crystal scroll bird. I can't believe, Daddy, I'm with him. And it's just like, king and the pawn go back in the same box. So until we stop playing the games of division, do we ever realize our true power and what all these forces are for? And also to remember that what we kind of dealt with was when we knew everything and we were aware of everything, and we were like, everything was super sleek and vectorized, and we had control over time, and all that shit became boring, because after a while, what is there to expect? So this is why they always say that that Yahweh has his Ashira. And what that means is that all of the supposedly logical forces always have an extremely intuitive bride that they've hooked up with in order to keep things interesting. And if you don't have that in your world, and that's for any being that is working with this quadrifoil system, if you don't have that in your world, you won't really find a lot of motivation to continue in the world. And so when you abuse these forces also, if you abuse the divine feminine within yourself, and a woman can do that and a man can do that because you both have that pole inside of yourself. So if you abuse that side of yourself and then reject what is actually in the reality, whether you've been coerced to do that or you don't see the beauty within yourself. And this, of course, is a lot of why this alien mythology always comes out, because it wants you to look to these aliens, just like it may want you to look to another race, or maybe even another animal or animal type, or anything besides self. And what we've learned is the greatest power is to realize that it is not only all a part of us, but that when we look inside for this, not only do we find it in a way that is different than when you're looking for something externally. So somebody's asking for the application of the process of the knowledge. It's a very open-ended question. Like, I would definitely advise that questions be drilled in a bit more to the specifics, because the application of the knowledge is based on really the individual. There's so much that can actually be done with what is being presented. It's really about drilling into some of the most simple things first, like what are you drinking? What's up with your water, your diet? And anybody who drove past that, your environment. Remember what we talked about in the beginning in some of those earlier recordings, we even were able to mark that there are things that are in your environment, old CDs that have just super dark music on it, pictures, items that people gave you that are connected to stupidity, old Disney films and DVDs that don't make any sense and also just wreak this magnetic toxin into your environment. And getting rid of that, because if you're having a hard time seeing, where is my synchronicity, it means that it's all clogged up, like your gears are all clogged up with all of these distractions. And the easiest way to remove all of that stuff is just to kind of remove your being. Like, instead of trying to always configure the reality and figure out what is it, who is it, give yourself some time, give yourself 2 or 3 weeks. It's interesting, again, that if we find ourselves not even being able to get 2 or 3 weeks to take ourselves away for a moment to repair and put ourselves back together, then that just kind of shows the kind of prison that we're being contained in, to be honest. Because what I saw, especially on this recent new moon, was the male and the feminine poles had almost come completely apart. The marriage was like a divorce for a moment. Notice the word divor basically means to go down or drain. So there was no power actually being generated during this new moon, because there was a separation between the masculine and feminine for a moment so they can identify who they were. Because what happens also in the entanglement, which is all about the cosmic spin and all about us communing and connecting with each other, but you can lose yourself in all of that. Let me put my big picture on here. My big picture on. You can lose yourself in all that with another person or another being's identity. So even when reading about this knowledge, like when you're reading about these different entities and spirits, this stuff is very real. So you have to still come into a strong bearing for yourself of what exactly is this all doing for me? What am I really getting from this? And even when I come in and I deliver these messages, that's what I ask myself. What am I getting on here for? And what do I want to do with this message that I'm delivering? I just don't want clicks and likes. So what was it about? It was about understanding. Again, for anybody that's lost, somebody say, I'm lost here. Yeah, you're lost then. You got to watch what you're really saying. Like, if you are responding, and I'm just talking directly into the feedback in the thread, if you're responding and that response is a response of confusion, it's only because the ego is actually trying to jump before you and say, hey, say something. I'm lost. Because then that would make other people feel like they're lost. Basic principles, kindergarten. If you can actually type www. and get on this page, what I gave you was basic principles about how this time that we're in right now, March 20th, and then the March 21st, March 22nd, as it keeps going on, is points where the constellational energies, the main constellational energies that control Earth, which we're just summarizing as the serpent and the reptile, they're in a communion point with each other. And the reason why you know that, you don't have to lean on some weird occult book and somebody else's knowledge that you can't verify, is because the actual planet is going into a spring. So you'll start seeing flowers pop out. If you're in tune with yourself, you actually will feel more sexual. Like during this full moon, you may even see the crypto charts go up. You'll see a lot of things that they've all tied into actually being a part of not only the lunar cycles, but also the planetary processes that go on Earth that actually boost energy. And when you're aware of this, it's like you're riding a wave, so you know exactly what to do in those moments and you avoid being distracted. So let me show you how it works once again. So during this time, it's a time for you to be building energy and ready to receive your power. Most people right now are distracted with death, mass sacrifices, mass suicides, because that is the inverted aspect of what's going on. Versus in December, okay, that's ice. Now in December, right now, where basically the fire is on, like it's that they say that, like there's a song that says, your sex is on fire. Okay, these are occult terms. You know, the guy's, oh, your sex is on fire. Okay, so what this is sex. Let's take the two words, sex and fire. Okay, what is this word, right? An occultist knows sex is six. Okay, because these vowels don't count in Kabbalah. This fire is phi, also known as five. Okay. So it's saying your six is a five, okay? And what this means is encoded in the Washington streets and a lot of other places on the planet, you see a conjunction between these two numbers, 6 and 5, which are symbolic to Venus and Saturn, a young woman and an old man. So you basically see these fructifying components, and this is what has got the sex on fire. And this is what is being talked about. And it's because humanity is treated like little kids, where they still haven't even had the birds and the bees conversation about how the animals play along into even us even getting here, right? Like, so there's these gaps in the knowledge, like we're dealing with little kids. And that's why little kids remark and say, I don't understand what's going on. I don't know what's happening, because that's like a childlike phase of saying, I don't know where I'm at. What am I doing? When every single thing around you, from how you got here, what you believe in, even your spiritual traditions, if you understood what they really mean, your math, your language that you're speaking, all this reveals to you exactly what's happening. So when you're able to merge those two forces with a 6 and a 5, which gives you 11, this actually is the birthing component. It actually creates the dual components that create the birth. So all these numbers are archetypes then. They're energies to create certain things. And when you understand, because really it's just always an even and an odd, that's how you can summarize it for yourself. If you're trying to go into the deep arcana about the number 6 and the number 5, it's there. But for a master that's just trying to summarize things very fast, 6, 5, positive, negative, odd, even. Okay, I know what it is. It's the two forces, the horizontal and the vertical waters. Life will be created there. But if you have this schism going on, which many people do, you're born naturally in a schism. How do you know that? Because you're born not an androgyne, and there are real hermaphrodites that still kind of pop up every now and then. But an androgyne is going to be born with both of the hands in equilibrium, not favoring one over the other. There's going to be a dual component system of the fertilization system. However that looks, it just means that the person doesn't feel like that they need to go out or externally for any kind of thing that is about them generating energy. And you still have these components installed, some of them not functioning as well, some degraded in certain states, but still inside there is an ability for you to power yourself with bliss, prana, and energies that you're generating wholly from the pleasure that you're having with you being in love with the reality. But when you're pissed off, and that's why it doesn't matter. If you get mad about something, if you're angry, it doesn't even matter. Like, even if it's whatever's fault that you think it is, you're vibrating something that nothing on the high end of abundance is going to be around. It's not a want to be around. It's laws of resonance. So if you're feeling great, you got a smile on your face. Even if, like I said, you got to start pushing into your own consciousness and saying, you know what, man, it's just get on with it already. Like, you're always mad and upset. Like, look at yourself. Look at yourself sometimes. Like, Think about, are you mad and upset and always want to fight all the time and always want to argue? I don't believe that. That's not real. That's not true. I hate this. I hate them. Why is this happening? So it doesn't really matter what's really going on in there, Doc. You're dark. And that's the sleight of hand. That's the forked tongue. That's how easy it can really be to convert a being that otherwise would be like some kind of light being and accelerating into a vast state of consciousness into just a foundation or a footstool that we stand on, because there's nothing that is powerful about that. It's just all about being just dense in those stages. And that's holding things up. And that has a use. And that's what one of the most important things to realize about all this. You're not going to change darkness and remove it from the world. What you can do is work to keep it in equal measure to the light by creating that within yourself and doing big things. Like right now, we have some big imbalances happening because some big things are opening up to happen too. But because this is a real-time framework and you have architects, magicians, savants, you name it, all working in this framework, it's really also about the most harmonic consciousness, the one that really has their 6 and their 5, their angel and their demon, or their light and their dark, their reptile and their mammal, really working together and actually on point, will see the greatest level of acceleration versus any other beings who have not actually opened up those components within themselves, because they are locked. There is a real intention by this society and by these all-pervading spiritual systems that we're seeing. We're living on this. So don't stick your head in the ground like an ostrich. The reason why we're even here talking about this is the holy knowledge has been virtually stripped from the youth. And here we are back again, basically de-demonizing our own energetic system, because these people have you believing at times that these symbols belong to the Illuminati and that these symbols are all about evil cults and this was the worshiping the sacrifice of the children and blah, blah, blah. When all those symbols mean is that, yeah, once you come into adepthood, your child is sacrificed for sure. Because as it says, when I was a child, I did childish things. But when I became an adept, I put childish things away. What is this talking about? What this is talking about is this is talking about, for those who are proposed masters and professed masters, that, see, as a child, the child has fun, okay? The child's excited. The child's surprised. Things are always new to the child, right? Think about what I'm saying. So there's a certain part of the child aspect that's great. It's amazing. But it's different than the adept. Okay? Now, the adept may know how to tap back into the child side of themselves, but the adept has transcended the surprise and transcended the entertainment and transcended all of that and come into the final essence. The thickest essence, the thickest ether. Do you know what the thickest ether is by word? It's called Sirius. Okay? Sirius. Because, see, all that playing around that many are doing, because they're like, you're remote controlling your life. You're being, in this whole system and letting them tell you what you are and acting confused. And now you're reprobate mind. And now you all this. And so when all that's going on, it leaves one the inability to actually tap into who they truly are. And who they truly are, it unlocks a very serious kind of scenario at first, especially. Because when you haven't been dealing with the truth and all of a sudden you're confronted with it, something's got to switch about how you're actually perceiving things for that moment. We call that it gets serious. So all the little play, like you sometimes doing with the childish behavior. I don't want that. I want that. All the little play when you take too many of the dosage or when you drink too many of the glasses or when you say certain words, all the play goes away and it gets very serious. And that's the realm of the adept. So this year, 2019, is a time for us to get very serious. There's been a lot of playing because the society, as we know, the educational system has kept everyone in a childlike phase and only woken you up to your adulthood like all at once. That's what these Me Too movements and all this stuff is really about. See, these are great initiations. The reason why, meaning that their great initiation means that it's taking place with a lot of people at one time. They're initiations into something. So if you notice that initiations, especially some of the hazing initiations, always contain the components of the leader doing something to the new initiate that becomes humiliating to the new initiate, but also brings a common place or a camaraderie amongst all of those initiates. Okay. So in this recent session, why a lot of people don't, or a lot of beings don't want to speak about it, there has been older beings, if you may, that have come into this younger planet and have done things that would equate to molestation to the planet for their own reasons and their own selfishness. Okay? So when that happens, that's like a planetary hazing. Okay? Because now there's a large group of the beings that have had something happen to them that is very embarrassing. And in that process, because when that happens to them, the one that conducts all that, it becomes like their leader for a while, like their abuser. You can watch this in psychology, but this has happened on a planetary level. So it becomes their leader. And until they confront it, can they ever really break out of it? And that's how secret societies really work. Like they have, like, let's say, for instance, the common action, and Chappelle was talking about this, is that when men join these secret societies, they drug them, and then the leader sexually sodomizes them. And when they come back to, they're shown what happened, and it becomes very embarrassing for them. But then they find out that it happened to everybody, and that becomes their secret. But while the leader, who is basically a demon, is walking around, basically using that as a form of control and a form of guilt within those that are in that society, okay? So then when you say, well, what is a mass ritual? Or well, what a mass ritual would be is somehow a lot of children being put into a situation where in some way or another that they either were mentally, spiritually, or physically molested. So they would have that as they would have that as their component, but until they confront, and that's why we confronted God, the old dog face, 10 years ago, until you confront that, then everything is going to be under that. And that's why they call it the Lord, because it's the lowest star, but everybody is worshiping the Lord. So everyone is worshiping the lowest thing. They're told, you're debased, you're a wretch. And this is not just church, okay? This is like, if you look into any system, this could be Churchill. This could be Marxism. This could be any of the systems that actually teach in this same kind of structure of duality and in this same kind of a structure of lack of respect for the divine feminine and masculine components and how they blend together to create pleasure, to create passion, to create the things that really drive us forward, not the things that actually bring death and the things that pull us into the vacuum and the things that hold us back. So with that being said, I'm just going to glance through here one more time just to see if I missed anyone that had that question out front. And I'm sure you get the point in relation to exactly how to conduct your energy through this process of, especially 2019. This is so serious because the reason why a lot of this stuff also lines up numerically, it starts lining up based on the days and then the lunar cycles. And it's because we're getting to 12 o'clock. Like I told everybody, that's 2020. So you're going to actually see these archetypes, these planetary systems, these chakras. We're going to see those actions in your life. You're going to see those people come around, right? Like whatever those beings are real beings. If you got your eyes open, you'll actually see, oh, okay, so she's really a Venus character. Like now that I think about it, that's her whole thing. So the reason why, again, it's important also for people that hold these archetypes, even though I wouldn't advise it, I would advise be in full spectrum. But those that hold the archetypes, let's say, for instance, this chick, she really gets into the whole Venus thing. She starts working with the Wicca really heavy. Now she's got the upright pentagram, so she's a white witch. This is symbolic to the Venus and its processions and its control over nature and the five-pointed star and the five-pointed plants. So she's doing that for a while, but then she starts getting bored, so she inverts her star, and which basically creates what we will call the bullseye. It's basically when you turn the eye of Aldebaran upside down, it becomes the eye of a goat. Okay? So she starts playing around with that because she's gravitating to two different poles of the same system. But somehow, because they call it the left hand and the right hand path, but it's on the same body. right? Left hand, right hand, it's on the same body. So it's just to give us the knowledge and awareness that life will keep challenging you with these dualistic components. And it's fusing out your energy, and it's doing it at a time where you need the energy now. The energy that's actually coming through is different than the energy that came in last year. And missing this train, it won't be my fault if you were listening to these recordings, because I'm just going to keep drilling it in, like telling you, hey, look, stay on point right now with your energy. I was doing something totally different. I was working on cosmic clocks. Halo came over, about to do a grand masterpiece on something. And then this thing kept coming up all week about the bullseye. The bullseye. And it started off, well, actually, God's eye. That's where it started. God's eye, God's eye. And it was because they have a little project where the kids make this kind of God's eye design. And it's basically two sticks, and then you weave them, put them together. I'm sure a lot of people know about it. Somebody can share the link. But with this God's eye, it just kept coming up. It kept coming up in, what the kids are working on. It was like I turn on the videos, and it's all about, this God's eye. And then so it's like, okay, already, what's up? Because, I keep seeing this, and it's just like, okay, Seven, just focus for 1 minute. What is God's eye? And I said, well, it's the eye of Aldebaran. It's the bull's eye, because that's what we're actually talking about in that respect. That's what the occultism means. And just like the word target, like when they say target, like the company Target's logo is a bull's eye, because the bull's eye's target is actually where you should shoot your fructifying component in order to fertilize the bull, so that way that you're able to produce more milk, more abundance. Okay. And that's what that symbolism has to do with. Now, going deeper, because again, I always get called in for the uncomfortable aspects of what goes on in the physical reality. Remember, we were talking about how in the ancient civilization that were really connected to this bull, that all the people inside of the dynasty actually had for themselves bull's horns. Let's just look at that real quick. Just so you can understand this specific race of people and them actually coming to Earth and them still being here in the planet in the form of DNA. Okay? And so if we just again look, everybody here has horns. The female has a horn. The males have horns and wings. And, there's more horns here. And these are even some of the more recent images. Anytime you go back to the older images, like these are some of the older images, these are all horns. And if you go into Upper Egypt, you'll see more of this motif. Because this restylization, by the way, of the Sumerians is virtually false. This is all a restylization. The real Sumerians, you'll definitely see those images as you keep scrolling through every now and then. And you could just tell that they're just totally different. It's like somebody did a redoing of the artistic work to, I guess, try to Europeanize it. And, this is like a Europeanize. And all they do is they just go in and they change up the facial features. But what this is about that Ham actually, as they say, went into his mother. But this is why Isis is holding her son on her lap, and basically was reproduced as MLK, which is where even, of course, African people are familiar with Martin Luther King, but it's actually a cognate for Moloch, because the M you see here, there's no O, the L, and then the CH is the K, and that's Kabbalism. And the reason why they want to make this like, oh, it's demon worship is because there's a war going on between Orion and Aldebaran, i.e. this fake-ass war going on between black people and white people, this fake-ass war going on between reptiles and mammals. You notice the fake war with reptiles and mammals. Notice how in all the occultism, they keep telling you, oh, yeah, the serpent. And they're the ones, it's the serpent. And then David Icke, here he comes. Okay, yeah, it's the serpent and against the human beings. And it's because they are engaged, and I'm not saying David Icke is engaged in this directly or is trying to do this, but they are directly engaged, these parties that understand this from a deep occult level of an adept. They're just trying to break these pieces apart. This is a simple Jed. And when you break this apart, like if you remove this one piece, this is like an entire car. So if you remove this, this stuff doesn't even work anymore. If you remove this piece, this doesn't work anymore. And that's what I keep saying this is what I mean by all is self. What I'm saying is if you don't know about all the components and where they fit in, it just doesn't work. So get your power back. Get your power online. You're going to need it. If you make this effort right now to dial into what I'm saying, if it didn't make any sense to you, replay it again and replay it again. It'll click. I've read stuff that it was already encrypted. There's books about alchemy they're just encrypted. It's coded anyway. But I just said, you know what? I'm gonna learn this. I'm gonna decrypt this. And I'll start at one paragraph and I'll read it. Makes no sense. I'll read it again. Makes no sense. But around the third time, I'll be like, I see a pattern here. And I see this word is really meaning something. Let's just assign this word, since this treaty is about gold. Let's assign this word to gold and move from there. And by the time I'm done, if I really want to expunge the knowledge from that alchemical treaty, if I really believe that it has something in there for me, because that was my original reason in going in there, then I'll be able to get it out of there. And that's what we also have to remember when we dive into these wombs. Whether it be one of these 7-star Palladian systems where, you're going deep down the tube of the snake, or you're going right into the big giant womb of the cow goddess. Either way, you need to have a plan about what it is that you're creating and what it is that you're doing and how these powerful forces work. Or else you end up in the same situation that many humans have been in, and that's creating the demons. And let's explain that real briefly, because companies can be demons. When you create something that it starts to gain its own level of power, and then you can't stop it, and it starts to become a problem for you, that's what we would say, quote unquote, is a demon. Okay, so let's explain this a little bit deeper. Now, let's say, for instance, that I'm going to show you how pacts with demons work in Hollywood. So let's say, for instance, I got natural star power. I'm good. I'm born on the right days, 10, 22, 78, 10 arcana, 10 major arcana, 22 minor arcana, 78 cards. Okay, good. So it's Jeb, J-E-B. This means Lord of the Earth, and I got all this stuff that's happening, right? So I'm good. But let's say a Kabbalist is also watching, and before I become completely aware of who I am, this Kabbalist, also sometimes gurus, slips under me because they know that I'm designed to actually do certain things, okay? So in this process, what can happen in that process, and this is what happens in Hollywood and the music industry a lot, is that now this Kabbalist, let's say a Leo Cohen, knows that this cat, like a DMX, has this ability to be able to magnetize, or let's say a Jay-Z who's from Marcy. Marcy means a serpent charmer. So he's coming from a project that means serpent charmer. He's got Memphis with him, which is the Memphis rite of Mizraim, the first pharaoh. He's got Cam with him, which is Kim, right? And so this is like a real divine process going on here, but I'm sure Jay-Z, which is a cognate of J to Z, which is basically the God. It's a term. It's what Hova really means. It's J to Z, the Kabbalah, from the word Y, which is in the Kabbalah, the first letter is Y, which is the I, which is a J. Okay, so that's the first letter, and then the last letter is a Z. So a J Z is the beginning and the end of the Kabbalah. Okay, so in this, you see a Kabbalistic configuration, but you actually don't know if the people that are involved, especially in the beginning, were aware that this occultation was happening around them. Really, it's just their power was being used. But since some Sith Lord, which are the Scythians, some of the dark Phoenicians, so since they have the holocron, which is the suit that they stole from Joseph of many colors, it's like a Superman suit, because they have this certain knowledge that gives them the ability to know who's guided in the future, which is the knowledge of the Essenes, the knowledge of the stars. Everybody has a star, knowing when stars are going to be popping up in a certain place that actually configures them properly to do certain great works. So they'll find that person like a baby in a fucking basket, like three wise adepts watching the stars, knowing when a Jedi just was born. Let's go and see if we can corrupt him to become a Sith. Or let's build a cloud around him and actually see if we can convert him into the dark side. That's kind of what generally happens to people who are born on these systems. So let me show you what happens to them when they're not even wise of their own energy and power. So what happens is that now every being has a certain amount of power, and it's based on the time that they're going to be here and their actions. But there's a sum total, and that sum total is within your star. So these brokers, they broke asses, the ones that work this magic, what they do is that they basically get you to sign a contract for your energy. And this is how they do it. Of course, the contract is nefarious. Of course, they're going to bankrupt you. But how the contract is set up, which is there's other entities involved, but they set a contract between you and another entity that basically pays for all the processes to actually happen for you to get through the stars. Basically, every time something is moved out of the way, something must be replaced. So if you're to go to the top or the bottom, something must be moved. In either way, you're going to be struggling and wrestling against entities. So even a being that wants to become the ruler of hell needs to be able to defeat Satan. You get it? So what happens is that these beings are enlisted to make all that happen on the metaphysical plane, and they charge for it. So what the Cohens do, which are the priests, the lying priest, they broker the deal and basically charge the person way over what they can afford. So they're going to be in debt. Now, this is the same banking system. So how this works is at first, when the transactions start, the energy starts coming through because the vault, they open the energy vault, by the way, completely open. They open the valve completely, okay, which can actually destroy your chakra centers, but they open it up all the way. A real spiritual process, you gradually become open and become aware of your powers and your abilities. They, through their Kabbalistic seal breaking, which they break into a chakra, break jewels, steal jewels, okay? So they open it up the vault completely. And so what this looks like is now you become an NFL star, okay? And the amount of power around it is crazy. Like I had a chance to be an NFL star for one day because they kept confusing me. I was in Atlanta and I went to one of the official after parties and they let me in through one door because it was one of my boys' tickets. And from then, I mean, like 5 people hit me up at first and I kept saying, I don't play for the Rams. I don't play for the Rams. Well, shoot, but after the 6th person, I was still in my younger years. I was like, yeah, you know, because it's just so much. It's like little kids run, just sign my helmet. So all this energy that's coming out, right? So this guy is like living in he's overloaded, actually. That's what all the chains are about, because they're trying to actually keep him reined in and chained in. And so, and all the jewels and all this stuff is going on around this guy. He has no clue what's happening. So all this stardom, the star power, this shine, this lights, and all this energy, this money, and all this is happening. But what's really also happening is his time wheel is spinning faster. So he's actually aging faster and spending all of the power from his star all in those moments. Okay? So then this is what happens. This is how the deal really starts to suck. Literally. Now, everybody has their time and season. Like they say in the music industry, you have about 3 years. In every industry, there's an actual orbit that after that, to stay on point, you have to actually become a conductor of stars. You have to become a star maker. So what happens is those who didn't become star makers, they actually end up discharging at some point. And this just means you're out of money. That's how it metamorphs in the real life. Because you have this high-ass footprint, you got to keep making this money. But when you come out of power, you don't have that kind of current anymore. So then what happens? This is what happens. You get plunged into an illusionary world where there's no power. There's only a false light, which they call Lucifer. And how this is set up is that now, let's say you were one of the Rams, but the deal is done. Now the contract's over. You're even a little broken up and hurt. You even got the kind of the brain crack helmet issue too, right? But you don't got any money. But every time you turn around, somebody's like, Mr. Falk, sign my blah, 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 blah. Now, you are so tired of this. Like when it was early in the game, this was like, yeah, baby. yeah, let me sign your breast. You know, it was that in the beginning, but now it's like, stay away from me. It's like that because what's really happening is the person is in an illusion themselves. Because Hollywood and all the rest of these false lights have pumped you up into this God that you aren't. What happens is people expect and lust after that God. And so when you don't have any power anymore, but you still have to pay this person. This is what happens. So when they come up, I want this. What they're really saying is they want the power from the lust that they've accumulated from the illusion of who you are supposed to be, who you are not. Now, remember, the Kabbalists are gone. They're on to the next guy. But you're still footing the bill, and that's what's happening. So, as I said, I always love to bring in those jewels and let you see exactly what's happening behind the scenes because for some reason I just have direct access and they kind of like me back there because it's just about maintaining the balance and realizing you're going to stay in this forever. So you might as well figure out where your component is of comfort. You see what I mean? We don't die, we slide. So you will go into another experience, and hopefully from this one, you will gain enough awareness of how to, one, charge, build your energy, don't leak. Because the more you leak, you're going to get in debt. I showed everyone the picture before. I'll show it to you one more time, just where you're at. Sometimes you need to kind of know where you're at to be able to set your clock. So let me just show you one time. This is one of the oldest depictions of what this looks like. Let me put this up on the screen. What this chasm, as we used to call it, and still do, looks like. Okay, this is the chasm, right? This is the vault. This is when they talk about floods. It's because when this thing starts acting up, okay? And let me throw in another image here to zoom in a little bit. So what is this? Like, if we were to zoom out of this, we've seen a lot of symbolism and stuff today, but if we were to zoom out of this and just had to make a logical guess of what we were looking at, the first thing that we should surmise is that this is like a drain, okay? And let me put me up here. That this would be like some kind of drain, okay? It looks like a drain. So now the occult laws behind this process of something like this being created is because light not only gets trapped into these gravity wells, black holes not only exist of gravity wells, but also water in itself. Water is extremely heavy. You ever lift a water bag? We were using water bags as weight bags. So water is extremely heavy, so naturally water goes down. Some people see water as like very, very light. That's steam. But water itself is a very dense component. It actually is more denser than fire. And this is what a lot of people we're not getting it sometimes. Fire is like, it's gone, it's up, it's like a bird. But it's the water that always remains down and goes down further and goes deep, right? So where we're at is in the deep. And that's why I was saying that we're underwater right now, that if I turn the dehumidifier on, we're going to pull enough water out of the air right now for us to drink, quench our thirst and everything because of how much water, especially in certain parts of the vault. Now, you have to adapt to some of the flat earth concepts about the disc shapes of the earth. You have to understand Martin Kinney's cosmic clock, his cosmic calendars and how that really sets up my spindle theory, as I call it. But you see these multiple planes that are here, and each of these are actually worlds within themselves. And these chasms, let's say, for instance, with the energy that's being conducted here, is like almost going down a drain. It's easier for you to go down. But the more you go down, you lose more power. These worlds actually are governed. They're in dominion by beings. And this is as simple as saying that, see, as a human being, you have a lot of power. You have more power than a dog. Okay? I'll say that again. As a human being, you have more power than a dog. You can kick a dog right now, lock him up in the garage. And it will be when I say he gets out of that garage or she gets out of the garage. You can call it abuse. You can call it whatever. But there are beings that have more power by sheer right of how they've been born and created, okay? So human beings have a lot of power, but what happens if you go down one? Just one. And you morph into a white horse. Even though that may be a nice white horse, if you're sitting in front of the dog food place, maybe it's not that great of a place to be. So what I'm saying is if you go down one level, one part in the vault, you lose power. That's what that's about. And this is also where the worlds of instinct exist, what is also termed zombie, meaning to just basically run on instinct. There's a larger being that controls how everyone moves and how everyone operates, okay? But the further you get out of the chasm, the more power you receive. You actually learn how, first of all, to jettison. This is about flying. A lot of people know how to go down, but they don't know how to go up. They know how to depress every damn thing, but when it comes time to build energy, they don't know anything about that. So learning how to build energy building, knowing how to do energy building things to yourself gives you a rocket, which you're going to need because remember, naturally, look at the sink, a drain. If you can imagine yourself going down a drain and you're in a speedboat, how much of that motor are you going to need to use to get out of the pool of the drain? A lot. So this is why they want to depress everybody because it takes all your power that is necessary for you to jettison out of this drain. And for those that have seen the image, they know that this right here, this black bird, is again known as that most hated bird, Pazuzu, which is basically what the Tartarian culture modeled themselves after, which are basically the dynasties that exact power on physical planes only, meaning that they basically just become dense deities. And I was looking for an image real briefly to see that, but I don't see that here. Lastly, my last show, I did mention the spies. 2-ball cane. This is the queen's seal for her spy, John D. 2 balls and a cane. Okay. And for those that recognize that, that's also Facebook's logo. So yes, they are spies, and we know that. And, but, you know, spy versus spy. You know, that's how it always works. You know, when you think you're watching everybody else, mainly you're being watched. So this is how it works. This is enough for everyone here to dial in. I said 15 minutes, so they know that this is my time traveler's version of 15 minutes, which is a bit more longer than the extended period on Earth. I'll leave it like that. And I just want to say wholeness and balance vibrations. Much love to everybody. Definitely check out the Mindful app. Like, this is going to another level. If you can be instrumental in assisting us in doing that, it'll be also greatly appreciated, because it's something that we want to deploy rapidly, because we want to bring in these sovereignty solutions. And it's so important right now to actually build our own platform to where we're generating current on our own. That ability is actually there for us to do, for us to begin to clean this energy that we're dealing with in everyday life, and us start to create things that have a direct connection with our uniqueness, which is the fruit that comes from our own tree. Remember, that's what you can do endlessly, inexhaustibly. You don't feel like that somebody's pulling your energy or that you're being drained. Also remember, don't get drained. This is literally a vortex type reality. But when you go into that higher stage of consciousness and self, and you sit in that space, you're able to also even see the benefits of the drain. Like, this is really what it's about. It's about realizing that element of surprise is always what keeps you coming back in here again with another plan and another stage of awareness that you knew not, because you just chose not to know. And remember, there's that other logical side that you know everything. And then there's, hey, let's go ahead and see what we can do for the uniqueness of the other beings. And that's what you don't know about. And that's what should bring you excitement. So that's all I have to say for today. I trust everyone as well. You know, have a great time. You know, this is a big crossover for us. This is where the energy actually meets up. And this is a great way to go forward with this spring. So wholeness.